Now, U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's possible visit to Taiwan has further strained U.S.-China relations. The two nations have been engaged in a war of words, with China warning against her visit and the United States refusing to budge.
This is very much precedent in the sense that previous speakers visited Taiwan. Many members of Congress go to Taiwan, including this year. And so if the speaker does decide to visit and China tries to create some kind of crisis or otherwise escalate tensions, that would be entirely on Beijing.
Now, Pelosi is reportedly expected to arrive in Taipei later today. This as the United States said that it would not be intimidated by Chinese saber-rattling over the visit. According to reports, Pelosi's itinerary includes meeting with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen on Wednesday. Pelosi began her Asia tour from Singapore on Monday, is currently in Malaysia. Her offices said that she will also visit South Korea and Japan. However, a Taiwan visit hasn't been confirmed so far. Pelosi's possible visit would mark the highest level U.S. visit to Taipei in decades. The Biden administration has called on China not to escalate tensions, while warning that Beijing may be positioning itself for a show of military strength around the island. This could include firing missiles near Taiwan or large-scale air or naval activities.
There is no reason for Beijing to turn a potential visit consistent with long-standing U.S. policy into some sort of crisis or conflict, or use it as a pretext to increase aggressive military activity in or around the Taiwan Strait. And yet, over the weekend, even before Speaker Pelosi arrived in the region, China conducted a live-fire exercise.
Meanwhile, China's UN ambassador Zhang Jun said that Pelosi's visit to Taiwan would undermine China and the U.S. relationship. He further added that Taiwan's tendency towards independence could lead the situation and it might be out of control, and warned of very dangerous consequences.
We can see such a visit is apparently very much dangerous, very much provocative. If the U.S. insists on on making the visit, China will take firm and strong measures to safeguard our national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Definitely, such a visit undermines the One China principle, undermines China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It also undermines the peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. So if such a visit happens, it will also undermine the relationship between China and the United States.
Now, this is not the first time China has issued a warning against Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Beijing, which views Taiwan as its own territory, has reacted fiercely to the idea. China has warned President Joe Biden that his administration was playing with fire and has announced a series of live-fire military drills in the Taiwan Straits in the backdrop of Pelosi's possible visit. This as Beijing has only made it clear that it would not sit idly by if she did make this trip. Now, for more on this, we're being joined by our correspondent, Patrick Falk from Beijing. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of the Biden administration's messaging to Taiwan so far?
Well, the Biden administration certainly wants to be seen to be consistent in its messaging on Taiwan, but it's important to outline as well that it isn't the White House's decision whether or not Nancy Pelosi goes there. One interesting thing to note is that last week in that discussion that took place between President Biden and President Xi talked about the One China principle being the bedrock for relations between the U.S. and China, which you have to say it really isn't the case, because the U.S. doesn't recognize the One China principle. It recognizes the One China policy, which essentially means that it acknowledges that there is only one China, but it doesn't necessarily see that the People's Republic is the sole legitimate government of China, including Taiwan. And President Biden said specifically that the US was committed to the one China policy and was against any altering of the status quo. And this is really what's at the heart of the matter and arguably the sort of principle behind Nancy Pelosi going there. This is to demonstrate its commitment to that policy. And as we heard National Security Advisor John Kirby say, Nancy Pelosi has a right to go there. There is no reason for China to escalate any sort of crisis when this is in line with long-standing US policy, or to use this as a pretext for further military aggression.
Right, absolutely. Now, that being said, what would this Taiwan visit by Nancy Pelosi mean for China? How do you expect it to respond then?
Well, look, it raises some very, very serious questions for China, and an important question for President Xi Jinping. We have already seen a military response. There had been a military build-up, if you like, in the lead up to Nancy Pelosi's tour of the region. But also today in particular, we've been hearing reports of fighter jets flying up in these tactical maneuvers and touching the median line of Taiwan Strait, which is essentially what separates or creates a safety buffer of sorts between China and Taiwan. There have also been ships sailing near the median line as well. So we have seen a military response already. That wasn't unexpected. The question is whether or not it will go any further than this. And this is what we're going to be keeping a close eye on, in particular, in the coming hours. But, you know, the other thing is that's worth noting is that, you know, this was in some ways seen as a bit of a distraction for China from some of the issues it's facing right now. Its economy is struggling to rebound from some of the self-imposed COVID-19 restrictions. It's in the middle of a mortgage and banking crisis. And as I say, you know, this was seen in many ways as something to divert attentions away from all of that. Now it's posed a question for President Xi Jinping at a very sensitive time indeed. And one might say that it does threaten his credibility in some ways.
All right. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for bringing us all the latest on that. Also, now we're joined by Keone Everington from Taiwan, who is the editor at Taiwan News. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. Now, speculations arrive. Nancy Pelosi is expected to visit Taiwan. What sort of response could this lead to by China? And is Taiwan prepared?
Yes. Right. They'll have to have a stronger response than before because there's been such a buildup, and China has been using such fiery language. So they're going to have to, essentially, it looks like she really is going to go ahead with this visit despite their warnings. So they'll have to do something more significant, more than more planes in the ADIZ. I mean, that's still a possibility, more flights in the ADIZ, or more possibly, I think as your previous guest mentioned, air or naval vessels crossing the median line, which is very rarely crossed. And another possibility would be missile tests. So I think you've mentioned that before in your broadcast. So it could be something near in the Taiwan Strait. They could launch missile tests in the Taiwan Strait or other areas near Taiwan. So those look to be the most likely responses by China to this, because it has to be something different from what they've been doing before, such as when Duckworth came, they increased flights in the ADIZ, but because they're making this in a much bigger deal, so they've got to save face for especially Xi to make him look strong, and but they're probably not going to interfere with her flight because that would be going too far.
All right. Now, this has been viewed as a pretext to increase Chinese aggression. How do you see such a move by the United States impact U.S.-China relations, also regional security?
Well, it is raising tension. China is raising tension by trumpeting this so much, by putting out so much messaging that's so strong. So it's raising tension. Now, in the short term, there's the small possibility that there could be some sort of miscalculation. That's what the U.S. is worried about. Taiwan is keeping a very, very tight lid on any comments about this trip. Ministry of Foreign Affairs has not said anything about it one way or another, and nor has Pelosi's camp. So it's China that's making all the saber rattling. So what's probably going to happen is, to save face, China's going to have to do something more aggressive, but something that they believe will probably not cause an escalation, such as a missile test or crossing the median line, but not entering Taiwan airspace, anything like that. And so therefore, probably what is going to happen is there's going to be tension over the coming days. They're probably going to respond after she leaves with some of those things that we mentioned. And then, but Taiwan and the U.S. are unlikely to respond in kind, and so therefore the situation should probably simmer down unless there's some sort of miscalculation or China goes a step too far in some way.
All right. Mr. Everington, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your analysis. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.